Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pepperdine's 6th Annual Career Week. Career Week is a Pepperdine collaborative between the 5 schools, each of whom hosts customized career exploration and networking programs. Kicking off our Education Career Day for GSEP, we have our first webinar hosted by alumna Jill Florant. Jill describes herself simply as a systems thinker who loves helping teachers. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering and Engineering Management at Stanford University. She went on to work for IBM, Cisco Systems, and Akami and Dascala, during which she went through hundreds, if not thousands, of technology implementation projects in the K-12 environment. While at Cisco, she helped start the first Cisco Networking Academy at Thurgood Marshall High School in San Francisco and helped many Northern California schools and districts establish their first connections to the internet. She completed her Master of Arts in Learning Technology in 2001 at Pepperdine's Graduate School of Education and Psychology. While in the program, she learned about Edmodo, the social networking company that is revolutionizing how teachers and students communicate both inside and outside of a classroom setting. Jill is now Senior Engagement Manager and Customer Advocate for Edmodo. She lives in Palo Alto, California. We're very pleased and honored to welcome Jill, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to her so that she can start with a little bit about her background and her current role, and then she has some information that she would love to share. Thanks, Jill.
Great, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I hope that over the next short while, some of my comments and experiences might be helpful to those of you who are participating on the webinar today. I kind of have 3 key ideas in mind that I wanted to share with you. And I also want to point out that there are kind of 3 ways that I'm expecting those of you who've taken the time to join us today can participate in my presentation. So the first thing that I want to do is just share with you kind of the general approach. I'm going to give you a little bit of my personal story so that you know what I did before Pepperdine, during Pepperdine, and after. I'll dial, pretty closely into what I've been doing in the 3 years since I graduated from Pepperdine, because I've been at Edmodo, and that has been a really compelling and interesting place to sit as the education technology world goes through a lot of change and a lot of rapid growth right now. And then I'll conclude some of the final time together by giving you the benefit of some pieces of advice, I guess, on how you might navigate some of the career choices that you have. But because my role at Pepperdine taught me how important engagement is in any kind of learning environment, and my purpose here today is to learn with you about kind of career opportunities. I wanted to encourage you. You can either sit and listen and watch the slides that I'm showing you, but you also may want to kind of have a second window open on your computer and be prepared to kind of actively navigate through some different websites or links that I might be sharing. And then finally, if you want to be the most engaged, I'll actually be sharing with you a little bit about Edmodo and some ways that you can get connected to me inside Edmodo and kind of back channel and share resources there. So that's just a few kind of housekeeping remarks about the agenda and plan, and really about the midway point of our presentation. I'll start kind of jumping into how you can actually use Edmodo during our time together today. So you're seeing in front of you just a few of the places that I've been. I'm at Edmodo now as Regional Director for the Western U.S., as Yaz had mentioned, but I was at Stanford and IBM and Cisco before I went to Pepperdine. While I was at Pepperdine, I was in the MALT program, the Masters in Learning Technology program, cohort 13. And one of the things that was really interesting to me during that process was the question of identity, because at that point in my career, I really was sort of looking at what do I do after having had a pretty successful first part of my career, and then I took some time off to have kids and be at home a little bit and play around with being retired, which didn't really suit me that well. So I was really looking at, what am I going to do for the second half of my career? And so my action research, you're looking at the little brochure that we did at the end of the session, really was focused on building an online set of resources and whether that would serve to build a community of practice. So effectively, when I was at places like Cisco and IBM, I was working on the private sector side of the technology world in schools. I'm really passionate about helping educators use technology, probably most fundamentally because of my personal experience where I kind of got it the way they taught it in school. I was very successful in high school and college, but I have a brother who had dropped out of high school and has really struggled throughout his whole life, I think, because of some of the ways that he was not able to really build some self-efficacy in his early schooling years. So being in K-12 education and being on the technology side of it was something that I had really done for a sustained number of years when I was at IBM in their K-12 division. And then also at Cisco, where I was the first person that Cisco ever hired specifically to work in sales and account management for K through 12 education. So I had had all of that experience prior to being at Pepperdine, but really, really felt like the engagement that I had in both learning about learning, in using some of the design thinking strategies that we did, and then most importantly, my action research, that helped kind of launch me into where I am now. What's kind of interesting is that I actually met some of the founders of Edmodo at the Midpoint Florida Education Technology Conference event that you go through during the MALT program. So, you get together at the beginning, middle, and end. At the middle point, for those of you who are not in the MALT program, we all go out to Florida and do about a week of face-to-face meetings around the Florida EdTech Conference, which is the second largest K-12 oriented technology conference in the country. And while walking around the conference floor with Paul Sparks, who was my professor at the time, we had an assignment to go up to a certain number of technology vendors and ask them what learning problem their company and their technology was solving. And so I actually had the opportunity to meet some of the founders of Edmodo, and I was really interested in them because I had actually investigated several different technology tools during my action research phase one and try to figure out, which tool would work best to support my research. And so I'd been doing a lot of work on and with Edmodo, and I had a little bit of a kind of foundational understanding of what they were doing, and it just really cemented some of what I had learned in the program when we went to FETC. A few months, or not even a few months, a few weeks after that, I actually saw that there was a job opportunity on Craigslist, and I emailed them on a Friday. It was about mid-March, I guess, of that year in Malt. And literally by Monday, I already had a response from them because I had said, hey, I met the founders of the company and, I may be perfect for this job. We'll have to see. But things went really quickly, and I was able to actually begin working at Edmodo as employee number 15 while they were in a very formative stage of their company. So I was actually finishing my master's program in my next couple rounds of action research while also starting as one of the adoption team members at Edmodo. So for the last 3 years, I've really been focused on some unusual things at Edmodo because Edmodo is a free and safe platform for schools. You don't have to buy it or build it. You just have to know how to use it. I've done a lot of work in kind of strategically partnering with professional development organizations, either schools or districts or regional groups, to help them learn about how to use Edmodo in the best way. So I'll give you a little bit more background on Edmodo next, because I think understanding kind of where I sit in the industry will be really interesting and helpful to those of you, because it is a free tool that is widely available to all of you. For those of you that are going to kind of actively participate, I'll be showing you in a couple of minutes how to get logged into Edmodo and to kind of learn and use some of those resources to better kind of connect with me today and beyond. One of the things that we really focus on at Edmodo, and it's really resonated with schools and district leaders all over the US and the globe, is this issue that with the information age sort of being over and learning accelerating, information accelerating in terms of every year we almost create more information than ever existed before. How do we create learning opportunities in the classroom that prepare students for jobs and careers that don't exist yet? That's a very essential driving question in all of the conversations and engagements that we have with districts around the world. And the way that we at Edmodo help address that is by creating a free and safe learning environment that looks and feels a lot like social media, but that is specifically designed for teachers in the classroom. I'm going to pause just for a moment here. Yaz, are you able to hear me okay? I saw a post that perhaps my audio wasn't coming through.
Yes, I can hear you, and Adriana can hear you. So I just sent a message to see if anyone else was having trouble. And Adriana suggested that she may check her computer mic.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't some fundamental flaw. I'm sure you'll let me know if anything degrades in terms of the audio quality.
Yes,
so
certainly.
kind of back to where we are, I shared with you just a little bit of background, and we'll go through a little bit more. I think for many of you, it will be very helpful just to kind of get a little bit of an overview for what is this thing called Edmodo, and then using it to kind of launch into these conversations about what kind of new career opportunities are out there, just from my perspective. So a little bit of just teaching you kind of what it is and what's going on with Edmodo. This is a screenshot of the environment itself. In it, it looks and feels just like Facebook, but teachers are able to actually create private groups that can be joined by either teachers or students. They can be the kids in their classroom or any colleagues that they collaborate with at their school or around the world. And so there's this idea that each group that a teacher creates, the teacher gets a private code, and then they can share that code with the students or colleagues that they want to privately join. So it's really, really easy to create an online learning environment. In fact, I've created one for us today, and I'll share with you a group joining code in just a moment. The other thing that is different about Edmodo from like your Facebook, Twitter, or Google Plus kind of social media that are built for commercial purposes is that teachers can send assignments, and those assignments allow students to turn in work on Edmodo, and there's a built-in sort of portfolio gradebook that allows teachers to see at a single glance all of the work that students have been turning in, whether it's documents or videos or podcasts or whatever kind of work, learning artifacts that they're turning into their teacher. And finally, there's an unlimited free storage library that is also really, really valuable to users. So this environment has been so successful. When I started the company back in, I joined, this is a graph not even of our whole history, but I joined in April of 2011. And we had about 1.1 million users. And my job when I started there was to help with adoption and growth of our user base. And we did that through innovative kind of learning partnerships and staff development, a lot of online learning about how to best use Edmodo. And as you can see, we had some pretty phenomenal results over the last few years. In fact, there are now more than 31 million users all around the world, including users in every single country that Google keeps analytics. There are more than 1 million just in the state of California, and about 89 of the top 100 largest school districts in the US have at least formally adopted our district best practices and are using Edmodo in ways that are consistent with what we recommend. So we've done pretty well, and you've probably seen a lot of the information in the press about Edmodo. And this is really kind of at the foundational core, I think, of some big changes in the industry. So in the past, you had seen, of course, the old style of textbook-based learning that we've all been a part of. And even at Pepperdine, we use learning management systems to connect and share. And we're sort of in the middle of this transition to what I like to call Class 3.0. So we're kind of shifting from kind of a learning management system world into a very mobile, learn anywhere type of world. And I think that the really compelling opportunity, at least in the K-16 learning space, is for teachers to really begin focusing on using the technology that is becoming so pervasive to support new models of learning. And I have just a little bit of advice for you about, how to at least think about the most important opportunities ahead of you, especially for those of you who might be classroom teachers who are looking at using technology in the classroom, or for those of you maybe on the business side who are looking at, where is a lot of the work and opportunity going. I always like to say there's 2 or 3 really important pieces of advice that I would have given this massive change. The first is that I think whether it's action research, which of course we at Pepperdine know and love so well, or it's some other kind of iterative learning model, almost every teacher who has a classroom of students that they're looking to engage with, they have to be looking at the kind of tasks that they are assigning their students to do, and also looking at whether it's challenge-based learning, design thinking, project-based learning, or action research. You need to have an iterative, process-oriented model that you are taking your students through, how to learn about learning as opposed to just learning the content. And I think that would serve you really well. I think you also want to become a part of a really engaged learning network. In Edmodo, the kinds of people who use Edmodo sign up for teacher accounts, and you see all of these different kinds of people in that large community of learners that we were looking at on the map a couple of minutes ago. And by being part of one of these engaged learning networks, whether it's Edmodo or something else, I know that Google Plus is another really popular environment, and a lot of schools, for example, are using Google domains, but maybe not as directly. Google's perhaps not quite as directly focused on learning as we are, but whatever your learning network is, you want to have a network and an environment or a learning platform that is continuing to grow with you. So for instance, we didn't just build Edmodo a few years ago and then kind of let it stay where it was. We're continuing to enhance and develop that. So the more that you use Edmodo and the more that you learn about Edmodo, the more valuable I think you are in whatever learning context you're going to be working. I talk a lot to superintendents actually about the value that's delivered at the point of instruction when somebody walks into their school district and they already know how to use Edmodo. That means that that teacher or that curriculum specialist or whomever it is going to be very valuable at delivering an engaged blended learning model without the superintendent having to buy or build them $1 million system that that either takes a lot of time or resources away from the classroom. So I think one of my overarching themes here is whether it's Edmodo specifically or something like it, that there is becoming this pervasive access to these engaged learning networks that you can not only learn with the students or colleagues that you're directing their learning process, but you also can learn from others in the community as well. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a minute. So for those of you that want to actually be part of what I said is this more engaged learning environment, I'm going to invite you to open up another window on your screen and go to www.edmodo.com. And what you're going to need to do is either log into your Edmodo teacher account or create a new one. And if you're going to go ahead and do that, just make a note of the group code V as in Victor, the letter Q, E as in Edward, P as in Peter, X, and D. And what we're going to do in that group is we're going to kind of accelerate the pace at which I am not only sharing advice for you, but giving you some resources and giving you some places inside this Edmodo group to learn a little bit about it, and also to connect with me and all of the other people who are on the line today as kind of a shared learning space for us to talk about really developing career opportunities together, because we're all Pepperdine alumni. So again, just maybe I'm going to move on, but the code is VQEPXD, and I'm sure that somebody can repost that in the chat box as well. But if you haven't already done so, you can open up another window and follow along right inside Edmodo. So what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes is just show and experience that environment. I'll show you that I've actually put these slides that we're going through right now into the group. And the group itself is private, so I've created it and I'm only sharing that code with you who are here today on this line. After today, I'll actually close up the group unless we get some requests for other people to join. But it'll generally be just us, the Pepperdine students and alumni, looking at Career Week opportunities. And we're going to be posting and replying to questions in that group. There are additional features in Edmodo that we won't really use today, but there is kind of the concept of assignments and quizzes, a library, and badges. So I'm going to show you how to send a note to the group. Everybody can reply. And when you look at why this is more relevant and important, say, than a Facebook group, I think the most important thing is that it also has this notion of teacher-directed kind of assignment space and portfolio learning that can be privately sent out inside Edmodo, but you'll be able to see a little bit more of what this environment is like. And again, it's not a pitch for Edmodo, but just the fact that this kind of environment is available, and we will actually talk, for those of you who do become really interested in this, because Edmodo has been growing so substantially. There are lots and lots of opportunities to actually join us here on the team at Edmodo. One of the best examples of that is actually this picture here. Our support team, almost every single one of these people is either a teacher who's used Edmodo in the classroom and has liked it so much that they have become a teacher advocate right inside Edmodo as part of our support community, or they're technology people who love helping teachers. And so this concept of Edmodo Support is one of the things that's a really growing part of our world. So I'm going to shift now over to this group, and I'm going to show you, again, for those of you that are just wanting to watch and listen, you're under no obligation to follow through this part and join us. But I can see that a couple of you are already beginning to join. But here inside this environment, you can see that we have a private group called Pepperdine Career Week. And what I have posted are just a couple of things into this group. Here's a place where you can introduce yourself to me and to others. The idea in Edmodo is that everyone who's a member of the group can post and reply. So I can say, my name is Jill Florant. I graduated in 2011. Now I'm at Edmodo. And so it's really easy to just make a post. But I'm going to now, sort of having given you a little bit more information about who I am and what my story has been in terms of managing through some of the opportunities during my Pepperdine time, and also kind of coming into contact with Edmodo directly after. I want to point out that in my presentation group here, I've also posted my LinkedIn profile. And I would love to, as one of my first and most important recommendations to you for career advice, make sure that you want to be findable on the web. LinkedIn is a great space for you to connect with others and kind of share, your resume information. For those of you that are interested in connecting with me personally, I'd love to hear from you inside LinkedIn. Go ahead and connect with me. You can also see some of my other contacts through this and some of my experiences and so on. And I've posted that into our group. I also want to point out that I'm going to be sharing some information about Edmodo and the kind of Edmodo jobs in here. So here are some, actually I already have posted. Let's just go directly to this. So one of the things that I had shared with you is a little bit more about the kind of internship and job opportunities we have. I'm going to pause for just a moment and show you at Edmodo, we're aggressively growing the team here. When I started, I was employee number 15, and now we have about 120 people at the company. And as you can see, we're hiring folks to do very similar roles to what I do, but in the Northeast and the Southeast. We're hiring for data scientists, designers. We just unfortunately lost our brand designer, the person who designed our cute little Edmodo logo, which we internally call Mo. She also had designed the Android logo for Google when she was there. But in addition to these opportunities, we're also aggressively going to be creating some internship opportunities. So let's take a look for right now at just a short little clip here inside our Edmodo group. We're going to try and get this to play loud enough. You might have to lean in a little bit to your screen to hear it, but let's look together here. So this is a little bit what it's like at Edmodo.
I think this experience has been pretty great for exposing me to the tech world and the ed tech world specifically. I had never worked at a private organization, private company before, and just seeing how a startup works has been really great and has taught me a lot about what I want to do. As an intern, we write code that, at least for me, immediately went into the product. So I guess my first day here, I started working on notifications, and so I wrote some tests, then I wrote a model, and I worked on the API, and I think like a week later, this was actually part of the product. As interns, we get an incredible amount of responsibility and very little direction in a good way. We're allowed to kind of run with the projects that we're assigned.
It's really the team that we have at Edmodo is the most exciting part, the most interesting part. And the fact that we have veterans of the industry, but also people who are really new in the support team. These different backgrounds allow me to learn a lot, and that's super exciting.
As an intern, we've had a lot of company events planned for us that were really fun. We had a rafting trip, we're going to a Giants game in Great America, and we also hang out outside of work. We go to dinner and go to tech talks and cool events in the Bay Area.
We spend all of our time together really and have become really good friends.
Almost it's scary because I feel like I shouldn't be having all this fun, but it's a job.
For hourly exercise, basically every 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. we all get together, walk out to the back, and start doing push-ups. We're currently on 50 push-ups around now, and we do pull-ups, sit-ups, whatever we can. We kind of mess around with the stairs to try to do some pull-ups. It's a lot of fun.
For any interns considering joining Edmodo, first I guess I would just say do it. It's a really amazing place with amazing people.
Edmodo really does work on a lot of things that are used widely throughout the industry. I have had access to a large number of different languages and different projects and different kind of like source control. There's a lot of things you don't learn in school that you learn at Edmodo.
I would definitely recommend coming to Edmodo. I would recommend researching like a mentor and finding exactly what you want to learn and what you want to do, and then that way you have a greater chance of achieving your goals for this summer.
I think this experience has, set me up well in my career.
This is a place where it's a small enough organization where you can really shape your experience to make it be whatever you want it to be. And so just grab the bull by the horns and just go for it.
So I hope that short glimpse of our video, and there's a longer one attached here as well, gives you a little bit of the sense, again, of some of the immediate opportunities directly inside Edmodo, whether they are the jobs similar to what I do here. You can see the regional director role this is pretty much what I do right now. But also in the internship world, again, Edmodo last summer hired about 18 interns. So for a company that has only about 100 employees, which we had at the time, 18 is a pretty significant number. So there's a lot of movement and opportunity in this space. I would say we'll have a similar number this year for student internships, which you can have graduated or still be in school to participate in those. I spoke to an intern today just in the hallway who graduated in May of last year, and she's still doing kind of internship level work. But then there's also huge job opportunities at the company. And I think more importantly, the reason that I wanted to focus so much on Edmodo specifically was that in the work that I do, again, interfacing with primarily most of the Western US for Edmodo, I've seen phenomenal opportunities among the people that we actually work with in the school districts in terms of career development, people who have become more knowledgeable about Edmodo itself, for instance, have gone through incredible transformations within their own careers as we've worked with them. So one teacher who just began using Edmodo in her own classroom, her name is Steve Johnson. She's down in Chula Vista School District, and Steve became an Edmodo user like I did about 2 years ago. Hang on a second, I must not have typed it in right. She actually became a speaker at our EdmodoCon conference last year. She now does staff development work at her school, has been promoted. She was recognized as the Chula Vista Educator of the Year from her local Rotary Club. And in fact, when we did our EdmodoCon event, where she was placed in the speaker lineup, she got to actually come right after. Let me pull it up here because it's so exciting. We had our founder Nick Borg talk, and then we had Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook fame actually kick things off, and then came Steve Lee. So I'll post the actual website here, but you can see just kind of the recordings are all available here, and literally it went Nick Borg, Sheryl Sandberg, and then Steve Lee was next. And so she's really had a tremendous amount of opportunity in her career. The other thing that's happening is that with so many districts adopting Edmodo, there are tons of opportunities. If you just Google LAUSD and the learning management system that they have kind of begun adopting organically is Edmodo. Edmodo is used at more than 600 schools already in LA, and that particular organization is actually hiring more than 100 tech coaches, many of them getting recognition because specifically of their Edmodo-related expertise. So I wanted to kind of summarize a couple of final pieces of advice and then open it up for questions. I think that one of the most important things that is a career issue for all of you, but especially coming out of the School of Education at Pepperdine, knowing yourself so that you can help communicate your brand and the brand that you have developed at Pepperdine with others is critical. I showed you earlier that kind of the knowing yourself part was a key aspect of my own personal statement, but it really resonated for me when I was at a conference that I was supporting this October. I loved this quote that Ruth Parker, who's one of the math leaders in the whole Western U.S. Out of Washington, she gave us this quote. She said, "I used to think my job was to teach students to see what I see. I no longer believe this. My job is to teach my students to see and to recognize that no matter what the problem is, we don't all see things in the same way. But when we examine our different ways of seeing and looking for the relationships involved, everyone sees more clearly and everyone understands more deeply." I love that because it so aptly, I think, communicates the role of a teacher these days. And I know that I personally went through that transformation myself when I was at Pepperdine. And so when you're looking at the kind of career opportunities that might lie ahead of you as you're looking at new opportunities, a few of my kind of final words of advice would be to really leverage the power of social, both the people who you are connected to in your cohorts today at school, but also the alumni who you can find through LinkedIn or through places like Facebook and Edmodo, in the entire kind of educational learning space. As I mentioned, Edmodo is one really great tool, and I'd love to, connect directly with many of you on LinkedIn or through Edmodo. The other piece of advice I want to give you is one that, really benefited me. So when I was in grad school and I was out at that Florida Ed Tech conference, I was able to go up and ask questions that perhaps you wouldn't ask of a vendor or a company if you weren't in school, and being, able to say, "Hey, I'm a grad student and I'm, in the final phase of a really important learning process." I think a lot of people in industry are really willing to sort of think back to when they were going through similar kind of career explorations and learning experiences, and they're much more willing to help than once you are done with school and you're calling and saying, "Oh, I'm calling from Edmodo," or "I'm calling from company XYZ." They, may not view you in the same sort of mentorship kind of learning environment as when you're still in school. So do not be afraid to, begin some of this outreach before you're entirely done with school. And just as you've probably heard in class, whether it's action research or just doing kind of connections, don't be afraid to make a little bit of that outreach and ask for help. And then finally, there are conferences like, for the next several weeks, I'm going to be on the road because there's a conference in Nashville, Tennessee. There's a conference going on today called TCEA. There's a conference that happened last week in Florida, FETC, that many of you might have been at. These are all great places to actually move the social networking into a face-to-face realm. In March, there's a computer using educators conference in Palm Springs in the middle of the month. That is a great place to actually network face-to-face. So if you were to, perhaps send out a LinkedIn connection request and, have that accepted by somebody who's a Pepperdine grad, maybe post a question like, "Hey, is there any chance you're going to be at Q? I'd love to meet you in person." I've responded to those kind of things positively. And in many cases, that personal connection or that extra step that you take to make the face-to-face connection is what can help lead you directly to opportunities like what I've had with Edmodo. So I think with that, the sort of present to you portion of the conversation today is complete, and I would love to begin taking some questions if there are any that have come in from the webinar audience that we have online.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. I really like what you said about really understanding what your personal brand is and also how you can build your pipeline through social networking, but also using those face-to-face opportunities to create a network that you can tap into. One of the questions that I wanted to follow up with, and I also want to give some time for our listeners to be able to write in questions in the chat feature if they would like to do so. So in kicking off the Q&A, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, given now your position in the industry and having left Pepperdine, when you look back at your experience at Pepperdine and what's unique about the training and the experience you had, what is unique about that brand, and how would you encourage our students and alumni to really promote the uniqueness of having had the learning technology, whether it's a doctoral or master's program, under their belt?
So I think the two things that are really most powerful from my standpoint is, number one, that Pepperdine, I think, correctly positions teachers and that human centric learning, or the way that they position people at the center of learning as opposed to technology at the center of learning is one of the things that is really impressive. I think when you look at other universities, and I've been exposed to so many, looking at the large number of districts and regional organizations that I work with, you hear again and again that there are some organizations that do a lot of technology only instruction, and maybe they don't have that same opportunity to construct knowledge together with a very purposeful kind of group of learners. And I think that aspect of Pepperdine's program really stands out. So you know the people in your cohort, you've actually met them face to face, you know your professors, you've actually gotten to know them firsthand, and it's the relationships coupled with the experiences and the technology that I think will continue to persist as technologies continue to change and a lot of new research on kind of what's working. I think we only know really the tip of the iceberg still about how the mind works. And so as much as in industry, it's very, very tempting to try and sort of scale up learning technology so that we take more and better advantage of the system's ability to do the same thing every time. But I really like the way that Pepperdine's sort of human-centered approach works well. I also am a huge believer in action research. So the fact is, I've said to many, many people that I think action research is the consummate 21st century skill. I think that when you look at your role in the world and you look at the intentional data-driven process that you go through to do action research when you identify a problem that you want to change or impact in a meaningful way, you can do that in any context, and it is incredibly successful everywhere that I've seen it work. And it's not something that is just a Pepperdine thing, but I think that the centrality of that work in what Pepperdine does with teaching and learning is a really incredible value to all of us who have done it. So those are two ideas, just that human-centeredness and the relative importance of action research. You can go up to almost any graduate of Pepperdine learning technology, the master's program anyway, and get into a very engaged conversation when you talk about what their action research was and how are they using it now. And I'm sure everybody will have continued to persist in some way.
Great, thank you. And Jill, how important do you think it is to develop a niche in the field? And how would you encourage someone to be able to promote their brand at a conference or professional association meetings? Is presenting at a meeting or presenting at a conference an important key to gaining visibility?
So I think that authenticity is really important. And when you look at that there's kind of a growing sense that the degree at which you're excellent at one specific thing. Like there's a lot of people in the middle, but then the people that you're really if you're going to do something, be the best at it. I think that the authenticity that comes from, for example, action research, again, something that you really passionately care about, should be self-evident when you are promoting yourself and the kind of work that you do. But so is, in general, the intentionality that you have and the way that you're using data to kind of guide and interpret what you do. It can't be overstated, the role of data in both education and business right now. And so even if you're using very qualitative measurements of whether you're succeeding or not, the more that you can speak generally to anybody that you're trying to communicate with about what you do and why you do it and what are the results when you're engaged in it, those kind of attributes should be there generally, whether it's a kind of a niche expertise or a broad expertise like that. That would be something that I think pervades almost every conversation that you would have. Are there other questions? Anybody bold enough to send in some chat window kind of questions? How are we doing for some time here?
We have a few more minutes, so if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to write them in the chat feature. Well, while people are thinking, I do have one more question for you, Jill.
Sure.
I like your story about when you were in the program and you were with Dr. Paul Sparks at the conference, and how your inquiry with the, was it the founder of Edmodo?
Yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah.
How that led to opportunities later. So how would you advise someone who may have already graduated and isn't as connected to their student experience, but who has targeted a company that they really want to work for? You've touched on this a little bit with social media, but any other specific advice you would have for them to get their foot in the door?
So that's a great question, and especially given that there's so much technology and automation in the sort of HR process these days. I once again would say, make sure that, for example, and am I sharing my screen? Can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, for instance, if you Google me, just Jill Florant, make sure that if somebody has received some sort of inquiry from you, that the kinds of things that they're going to be able to find on the first and second page in your Google summary are going to be the types of things that you want to be promoting in your brand. So, in the first page or two, you see a lot of the presentations that I do, the recommendations that I have on Edmodo. So, when you're looking at targeting a specific company, in many cases, you're going to be sending out some sort of inquiry that's electronic. So they may or may not get back to you. And in many cases, they'll actually be, looking at your online profile. So make sure that if you have a LinkedIn profile, that it accurately states kind of who you are and what you do. But then in many cases, the types of, so the big challenge in many cases is going to be, separating yourself out from the hordes of people who are also sending in resumes. And that's why knowing where some of the industry convening events that are sort of open to those face-to-face meetings would be more important. And even knowing that you can search for, Pepperdine in LinkedIn and, look to see, well, who does Jill know at, this company that she might be able to make an introduction. So almost all companies actually give more credence to insiders for hiring opportunities, because they think that the people who are inside the company are going to make better recommendations for who maybe should, be a potential employee. So use your Pepperdine network and kind of triangulate, if you will. And again, I can't state enough that for me personally, I don't know if Edmodo would have snatched my resume out of the web so quickly if I wasn't able to say, hey, I met your founder, Jeff O'Hara, a few weeks ago. So I hope that helps. Are there any final other questions that you'd like to go through? I really appreciate everybody's time and attention today to listen to my story.
We do actually have one more question from the audience. Someone asked, could you explain the teacher badges and what their purpose is?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a question specifically to Edmodo. And so when you look at your Edmodo account, one of the things that is true is that every teacher and student who is on Edmodo has a profile page. And right now, one of the fun things for teachers is that they can create and award badges to students. And within the teacher badges, which is what the questions were, these are badges that actually Edmodo specifically awards to teachers who are doing things that we value. So you can see that I personally have been awarded about 11 badges. So I have more than 20 teacher connections on Edmodo. I'm using Edmodo as part of a verified school or district account. I've attended an Edmodo training group. I also have had more than 100 views of content. So as soon as some of these are things that happen very easily, but there's kind of a general definition under it, and all of a sudden you'll just be doing certain kinds of things inside the community of Edmodo, and you'll see that you have been awarded a badge. One of the easiest things to do in Edmodo is to be awarded a badge as a community member. So there's this little discover button, and you can find literally hundreds of thousands of other teachers who are building and sharing their collaborative personal learning networks inside subject area groups. So if you opt to follow any one of these teacher sharing communities, let's say language arts, where there are more than 330,000 teachers who are constantly sharing questions and resources and making connections with each other, if you join this community by clicking follow this subject, you'll earn a teacher badge for that. There's a big request among our district and professional development partners. They'd like to be able to use Edmodo to award teacher badges. And so that's a feature we've been working on and thinking a lot about, especially as it relates to kind of the micro credentialing and open badge movements out there. So you'll probably see more from us on teacher badges in the future, but that's how teacher badges on Edmodo work right now. Definitely a good thing to have lots of badges.
I bet. Great. Well, Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to our students and alumni and for sharing such valuable information. You not only provided some great tips in terms of the job search and building a networking pipeline, but you really gave a good window into Edmodo as a company and some of the features and some of the values that the company holds as well too. So for those who are interested in Edmodo, I think you gave a great sense of the culture, which they can then apply or use when they're applying for positions there. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, and thanks you guys so much for taking some time. I'd love to connect with you either through LinkedIn or at events. I will be at the Q conference in Palm Springs, so come find me there at the Edmodo booth if you want to meet me in person, or at ISTE in Atlanta this year. And just keep up your personal learning progress, and most importantly, the more you know yourself and you stay in touch with what's going on in the world around you, you'll I'm sure find really great ways to leverage what you've learned at Pepperdine and in exploring your own best future. So thanks for taking time to learn today.
Great, thank you. And for those that are interested, the second webinar during Education Career Day is the social enterprise way, finding a job in a social enterprise, and that's going to be at 12:30. And then at 2 o'clock, we have a webinar on becoming an adjunct faculty. So for those who are interested in getting their foot in the door into higher ed teaching, that'll be a great webinar as well. And then this afternoon, we have 2 live sessions at the West LA campus. The Cultural Way, so building cultural competency in the interview and on the job, as well as the Teacher Way, the principal scoop on how to find a job for teachers. So thanks again, and hope you enjoy the rest of Career Week.
Thanks, everyone.